The Lotus Flower trope is probably by far the most overexposed trope that centers around Asians. She is also known as the China doll, geisha girl, or lotus bloom. Arguably, TV tropes Mighty Whitey and Mellow Yellow trope also applies. While stock characters like the Kung Fu Hero, an Asian man who knows how to kick ass and take names, has recently been on the rise in cinema, that insurgence came with Bruce Lee's international success in the 70s. The Lotus Flower, on the other hand, probably proliferated in pop culture since the dawn of colonization. She's an over-sexualized woman who is submissive and docile. She's been in movies since as far as the 1920s, and of course in many, many, many adult videos. With what happened in Atlanta a few weeks ago and the continuous treatment of Asian women, this trope is obviously very harmful. And in this video, I will be deep diving into it. Hi, I'm Stella, and welcome to Salicot Cinemas, where I talk about movies because I watch too many and have too many opinions about them. In this video, I'll be going over another movie trope that centers around Asians. If you're into that kind of thing, maybe give me a little subscribe and you can join the fam. Or even leave me a comment down below for what other tropes you'd like me to cover. Today, I'm going to be going over the Lotus Flower. There are a lot of different names for her, but I will be going over who she is, a brief history, analyzing a couple depictions of her, and how she looks today. Some boundaries before we begin. As per usual, this video will only be centering around Western cinema, and not video games or the porn industry. The connotations of this trope is a little different with the context of Asian cinema, especially since in American movies, this girl is usually paired off with a white man. I will also not be including any TV shows because if I'm being honest, I don't actually watch that many shows. They ask a lot of my attention span. Okay, let's get started. First and foremost, who is the Lotus Flower? She shares a lot of similarities with the Damaged Ninja Girl, another trope that I dissected in another video. So some clips that I will show in this video will overlap with that one. But the key difference is that she is not tough whatsoever. She is mentally weak and physically weak. She is heavily infantilized and could arguably fall under the born sexy yesterday trope as well. This is a term coined by the Pop Culture Detective in 2017, which describes a character who is physically a grown woman and is incredibly attractive, but mentally acts like a child. She's naive and needs the man to guide her through life, and does not have her own agency. This trope is heavily featured in sci-fi or neo-colonization movies. The Lotus Flower is that on top of the fact that her Asianness is emphasized. This can be seen in how she dresses, the fact that the main male protagonist meets her in Asia, typically in the middle of war, her name, her accent, or her inability to speak English. Another landmark of this trope is that she is usually a liminal space for a white man, meaning she is not the end game for him. He's likely going through something, be it through in the middle of war, or he's had his heart broken by a white girl and needs some sexual comfort. In early depictions of this trope, the white man leaves her to go back to his country, and or to get back with the white girl. The Lotus Flower ends up killing herself due to the heartbreak. Essentially, her life is meaningless without a white man to serve. The purpose of this character is typically meant to be hyper-feminine, in order to overemphasize the man's masculinity through the means of juxtaposition. Particularly with movies that are set near a major war or was made in the 50s or 60s, this trope was also used as a means to personify Western domination over the East. According to Joey Lee's article called East Asian China Doll or Dragon Lady, it is stated that after the Opium Wars opened trade channels to East Asia, particularly in China and Japan in the mid-1800s, Western colonists engaged in Orientalism by mythologizing the East based on fantasies of the other. As the first encounters with Japanese women were with those trapped by military sex work, their understanding of Asia and East Asian women were of sex and service. Europeans brought home their colonial fantasies of pale, fragile, and diminutive Asian women, and continued circulating these images to ensure the certainty of their ownership and domination over the East. Xing argues that the Orient is almost a European invention, becoming a distant land of romance, danger, criminal experiences, and essentially a place in which white people were privileged with entering and exiting to escape their burdens. Anna May Wong was usually subject to these roles. Many of her roles fell under the Lotus Flower trope or the Dragon Lady, another character that I will get into in a future video. One of her first roles, literally named Lotus Flower in Toll of the Sea, she is just that. She meets an American soldier who washes up on the shore, and she helps nurse him back to health. They quickly fall in love, and the soldier promises to take her back to America. Excitedly, Lotus Flower tells her Chinese friends, and they tease her for being so naive. Apparently, this happens so many times in their town that one of her friends discloses that 4 different soldiers have also given her promises of marrying and going back to America with them. But they always leave her in China. Sure enough, the soldier leaves without Lotus Flower, who is actually pregnant with his child. Years later, the soldier has the caucasity to bring back the white woman, Elise, that he did end up wifing up in America, because he wanted her to meet Lotus Flower. By the end of the movie, Lotus Flower convinces Elise to take her child and have a better life in America, and lies to the kid that Elise was actually his mother all along. It is implied by the end of the movie that she has drowned herself in despair. We see this time and time again, and we see a large insurgence of this character trope after World War II. Another movie that could arguably be one of this trope's codifiers was the 1957's Sayonara, starring Marlon Brando, who plays Ace. He starts the movie off very jaded from World War II, and is very wary of Japanese people.
Go ahead and marry this slant-eyed runt if you want to. It'll serve you right.
It isn't until his friend, Airman Kelly, tells him that he is planning on getting married to a Japanese woman named Katsumi. The actress that plays her, Miyoshi Umeki, was unfortunately thrown into this role of Lotus Flower many times. This movie really thought that it did something because it not only had 1, but 2 solid interracial couples, and a third that is implied. I will admit, I was pretty pleasantly surprised that this movie made an attempt, no matter how shallow of an attempt, to humanize Japanese people so soon after World War II. There's a conversation between Ace and Hanaogi, his love interest, where they sort of unpack the biases that Ace has against the Japanese, and that Hanaogi originally thought that Americans were animals. But again, apparently what made them realize that the other's race wasn't actually that bad was because they thought the other was hot. I think for its time, I think this movie was pretty progressive, I guess. But it would have hit the message a lot harder if, they didn't try to do blatant yellowface. You really want to have a whole ass movie trying to sympathize a whole other culture, but you don't even hire a Japanese man to play the one Asian man in a speaking role? Though that does say a lot about what the 50s thought about Asian men, when they weren't willing to cast one that was going to have an implicit relationship with a white woman. And even then, that relationship isn't explicitly showed, it's just kind of like, will they or won't they? Especially since white masculinity is put on such a pedestal in this movie specifically. One major difference with this trope, however, is that Ace and Hanaogi actually end up together.
Yeah. Tell him we said sayonara.
However, it should be noted that Katsumi is very much a stronger example of being a Lotus Flower, with her significantly being more submissive and in servitude of her husband. She and Kelly end up committing double suicide, so they can't ever be apart. True love. Racism is over. Surprisingly, this trope has been on the decline in the last 5 years or so, while the submissive Asian girl stereotype is still alive and thriving in other industries. There haven't been that many movies that actually feature this character anymore. Granted, there was a blip of popularity in this character in the early 2000s and the early 2010s. In 2013's Wolverine, Logan meets Mariko, the daughter of a Japanese man that Logan saved decades earlier. Upon the supposed death of the man, Mariko and Logan find themselves running from the people that they suspected were responsible for his death and or wanting to take over his business and money. Naturally, there is a lot of sexual tension between the two, and there is the illusion of Mariko being a strong woman in comparison to the other depictions of the Lotus Flower. She ends up being the CEO of her father's company, and she throws knives like one time. However, she still ultimately needs Logan to protect her, and she is still ultimately the temporary companion for him. The entire movie, even when he is sleeping next to Mariko, he fantasizes about Jean Grey, who Wolverine famously pines over, which is very typical to Lotus Flower trends. One divergence of this trope is that when Logan decides to go back to America, she isn't particularly heartbroken, nor does she attempt to fatally hurt herself. Instead, she is pretty blasé about him going back, and makes the half-assed attempt of asking him to stay. But at the end of the day, she is now CEO of her father's company. Refreshingly, she would would rather secure the bag instead of following him across the world. The same goes for Knives Chow in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Again, she has some semblance of strength. Similar to Mariko, she knows how to throw knives, has a rebellious phase, and she knows some martial arts. But again, a liminal space for our white protagonist. He got with knives because he was pining over his ex, Envy Adams, a white girl, and then proceeds to pine over Ramona, another white girl, while he is actually dating Knives. Another nail on the coffin is that she is underage, really hammering in that there is a power imbalance between the two, and to emphasize her submissiveness. If you've seen my other video going into the damaged ninja girl, hint you should, you would probably notice that these examples coincide with the ones that I use in that video as well. This is because I've realized recently that the damaged ninja girl is basically an evolution of the Lotus Flower. If anything, it takes the Lotus Flower and the Dragon Lady and rolls them into one. She has the agreeableness of the Lotus Flower, but has the spark and the fight that the Dragon Lady has. What is nice though is that there are some depictions of Asian women that are almost framed to be submissive with their quiet or shy demeanor. However, as the story progresses, it will be revealed that she actually does have some agency, and her life is not limited to being the plot device of a man. We see a much more authentic and relatable quiet strength in these women, rather than the brute force like some of her contemporaries. Admittedly, I don't actually like the To All the Boys series, but that's mostly because I'm a Grinch and I don't like most movies that are targeted towards teenagers, unless it's gay and or I'm watching it for nostalgia reasons. But I will commend that they take this character that is typically relegated to the supportive best friend role and instead has Lara Jean in the limelight. Initially, Lara Jean seems to be made out as the typical Lotus Flower. She's boy-obsessed, she isn't particularly boisterous like her friends or her sisters, she's very innocent and young, and she seemingly puts a lot of her happiness on whoever her love interest is. Notably, she and Peter start to fake date each other while Peter is trying to get over his ex-girlfriend. However, as we go further into her story and the later movies, we learn more about her interests and her own history. There is a big emphasis on the fact that she is explicitly choosing to stay with Peter, rather than the movie making it seem like them being together is more up to the white man like we see with countless other Lotus Flowers. Peter is the one that is endlessly devoted to her throughout the sequels, and it's Lara Jean who wavers between her choices. What is important is that ultimately, Lara Jean has a life beyond Peter. If she had ended up breaking up with him in the second movie, she was eyeing a different guy anyway, and in the third, she would have just left him to pursue her dream career at her dream school. While I'm sure she wouldn't have ended her life like many of the other love-obsessed Lotus Flowers, the movie takes care to show that she actually has other things going on in her life. Now consider this as an obligatory disclaimer. If you're an Asian woman watching this and you have found yourself with a white partner, or you genuinely like domination, this is not a video that is telling you to stop or that you are doing anything wrong. Nor am I here to stop people from enjoying the company and the activities that they enjoy. The difference is that these movies make it seem like all these women's sole purpose in life is to be a liminal space for these white men, for experimentation, and outside of that, our lives are disposable. That our only purpose is to hike up some man's fragile masculinity so that he can feel stronger being beside someone weak physically and emotionally. With these characters, it also makes it seem like the only redeemable aspect of our race is the sexual availability of our women. This trope is heavily focused on what the man wants, and very little to do with if the woman actually has any agency whatsoever. Again, very different from being a real woman that actually wants that domination, because you likely have a life and other aspirations and interests beyond that. Like I said, this trope is heavily exposed beyond just movies. Of course, this is premeditated so far that there are certainly some women out there that have attempted to embody this trope in real life. What's wrong with this trope is that it perpetuates this idea that it's okay to treat Asian women like this, and beyond pleasing a white man, our lives are worthless.
Why you not let me be your permanent girlfriend?
Oh, stop it, Susie. We've been all through that.
This view of Asian women runs so deep culturally that it would take a huge overhaul of all of the media in order to get rid of this racist and misogynist mentality. Well, thanks for watching this video. Also, big thanks to my friend Angela Nguyen for reading over this video script for me. There are some links down below for some organizations that help support the fight against Asian hate crimes. If you're low on cash, make sure to check out those organizations anyway, because they show some actionables that are beyond just using your wallet. I hope you all stay safe out there. I've been Salicot Cinemas, and thanks for watching. Maybe leave me a like or a comment down below, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye!